Well, gentlemen, here we are as 2017 is winding down, lined up for yet another pre-production meeting for Right Angle at BillWhittle.com, paid for by the members at BillWhittle.com, and available virtually only to you. And I say virtually because it's possible that you may have some non-member peering over your shoulder even now.
We frown on that kind of activity.
There's a significant additional charge imposed.
Right.
We're paying per viewer.
By the way, we are considering, like some of the airlines, we're considering assessing an additional fee for viewers of size. So
we've decided against that.
It's in the discussion phase right now, but unfortunately, Steve brought up the point that they might also want it to be imposed upon hosts of size, in which case we'd go down to a two-man show.
And
I can't afford being here.
We're not going to do that, but if we do require oxygen masks, you will be able to rent those by the minute.
We suck all the oxygen out of any room.
That's right. You know, I did hear this week, and this is not one of my topics for the show, but I did hear that there is some consideration to levying an additional tax on meat because of meat's role in global warming, and therefore people should have to pay more in order to eat meat.
They will find a way to tax everything, Scott.
We already do pay more to eat meat because it's meat and it's worth it.
That's right. Yeah. I could get a whole big bag of celery, I think, for less than, in fact, Today I got a text alert from Amazon, which has this new thing called Treasure Truck. This is not an ad for Amazon. They have not paid for anything. But they have this thing where they show up at random places and then they text you and they say, hey, we got a truckload, in this case, of 4-ounce fillets. And you can get like 6 4-ounce fillets, or maybe it was 4 6-ounce fillets for $36. Like you're going to jump in your car and race over there. So you're right. Meat is like a semi-precious gem.
And always has been.
Well, this week, Stephen Green, stoked with plenty of supplies of meat, is actually going to be hosting our members only and our regular episodes, which means you're going to need more protein than ever. Am I right, Steve?
I am. In fact, I had my it's my favorite Tuesday or Monday taping day cheater lunch, where I look to see if we've got any good roast beef in the meat drawer, and I pile some on top of a bunch of Triscuits and just shovel them down while I work on my topics.
I'm sorry. When you said meat drawer, I didn't picture it inside of a refrigerator. I just pictured like a drawer in the kitchen. You just pull it out and there's some meat in it.
Oh, I could have one in every room.
So what did that fine steak inspire you to do?
I have 2 topics. Good thing, because I've got 2 segments. And I even know which way I want to do them. There is this thing, it should have been parody, and yet it wasn't.
The public one, before you go you go a step further, the public one needs to be the one that you texted us both about a couple days ago. It's like dibs, 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 dibs.
Yeah, I love this. It's an article that I swear was not parody by Lara Witt, who I think we've come across before. She runs the blog Femme Feministe, and she has a handy dating guide for women who don't want to go on second dates.
I have heard of this.
It's 10 questions that your intersectional genderqueer friend thinks you should ask of your man on a first date.
This is kind of a pre-screening regimen?
Yes. And I copied and pasted.
Please don't give it to us now. Give it to us during the show so we can. And we want to hear every one of them.
Everything fresh. Oh, I should get all 10?
We want to hear every one of them.
All right, I'll get all 10. This segment's going to go up for an hour. But, people getting your money's worth, I guess.
Don't you miss the days when you just wanted to, all you needed to know is, is he or she of marriageable age? Do they come from a good family, and can they provide you with, a keeping of 10,000 pounds per year or whatever,
Or like, how many goats?
That's
How many goats?
I used to tell my daughters that, like when if somebody expressed interest in them, I'd say, we're talking a whole flock of goats on this one, buddy.
Oh, boy. Well, they can hear Zipper from a mile away. That's a punchline to a different joke. Listen, I posted just one of the questions on Monday on Instapundit, and last I saw there were over 400 comments on this thing. So there is.
Okay, give us one.
Okay, I'll give you the same one.
Give us that whet our
I'll give you the
appetites.
same one I put on Instapundit, since that's one that. And this is only the third question, mind you. And if you hear this question third and you're not already on your way to the door, then honestly you deserve whatever happens to you next.
Are the questions organized in chronological order, like they should be administered according to this sequence?
I don't know, but I'll look into that before we tape the segment.
Okay.
Here's the question. This is the third out of the 10. How do you, the date that I'm on, work to dismantle sexism and misogyny in your life?
Bachelor number 2, what would you say?
I'll tell you in one moment. I've just got to make an extremely important phone call. I'll be right out.
That's right.
Yes.
I'll be right back.
Oh, right. I think my phone just vibrated.
The voices in my head are telling me to go outside.
I dismember the patriarchy by divorcing you from this particular individual part of the patriarchy, and right. You have a very pleasant evening and enjoy your half of the check.
I will be helping to dismember the patriarchy if even now I feel like slitting my own throat just to get out of here.
An interesting answer to that would be:
I gnawed off my own arm to get out of the date, and it wasn't even trapped under anything.
I insist on the women that I go out with paying for the entire meal. In fact, all meals.
That's right. Yep. For the eternal
for the entire
future.
Relationship.
That's
right. By the way, make me a sandwich.
So this is now. I hate to play the feminist advocate, but
sure.
I think that there probably is a place for a few sort of nonchalant screening questions in the course of any dating relationship. But I'm not sure they should have to do with politics or what role you're playing in the latest pink hat rally.
Yeah,
that's what a first date is, Scott. The whole thing is nothing but basically an interview and a number of questions. And if it turns out the guy's main interests are, taxidermy and vacations with mother, you probably want to pass on that. And that's all I'm saying. I don't think you need to, let's talk about this and let's talk about that. These people are determined to take all of the enjoyment out of life possible. I don't suppose I can say things like this anymore without immediately saying, needless to say, if the guy is a cat and makes advances on you that you don't want, then he's a jerk. If he touches you and you don't want, then he's a criminal. And there you go. I mean, how hard is it?
What happened to the good old days of the early 80s where a young lady would, sort of bat her eyes at you and kind of look down a little sheepishly and then say, here's a specimen cup. I'll meet you outside the clinic.
It was in more innocent times, Scott.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Wow. I sense we'll have some fun with this one. And for members, something a little more serious. I wasn't really sure what to do, but there is one of those kind of big yet under the radar stories this week. A Chinese diplomat, in fact, a senior Chinese diplomat, whose name I can't recall, and it's not in my notes here, has threatened that if the U.S. Navy pays an official port visit to Taiwan, China will go to war instantly.
With whom?
And invade Taiwan.
Oh, Taiwan.
Yeah.
Really?
And
let's test that theory.
Exactly. This is something that we need to be people need to be aware of, because this is what is, for all intents and purposes, a sovereign nation. And the U.S. Navy exists to maintain freedom of the seas. And if we can't visit the ports that we want to visit, then China's going to have a very big reckoning as to what that means. But
you don't have to qualify that for all intents and purposes. It is.
Yeah.
And I talked with a 3-star admiral about this. I said, Malud, when these guys were building these islands out in the middle of the Pacific, if it had been me, the second they said that there's a 12-mile exclusionary zone around these artificial islands was the second that I would have dropped anchor right off of one of them with an aircraft carrier and said, no, you don't get to create these zones in the middle of the Pacific. Yeah. Go try again. And if we'd done that, we wouldn't have this problem.
Yep.
Oh, really. Well, I think that we ought to test that theory right away, because if you don't stop this kind of blackmail now, they will believe. The real threat is they'll believe that you're afraid of them.
That we don't mean it, yeah. And
yeah.
What also interests me, and I want to get into this in the segment, is the Chinese politics of it. Is this now Chinese policy? Was the diplomat speaking out of turn? Are they going to rein this guy back in?
No, that was always that has been their primary objective since partition.
1949, yeah.
Well, and I think that this is, Americans would naturally recoil at the prospect of war over what seems to be a symbolic gesture of a long, relatively stable, if despicable relationship. So, like, the natural inclination of Americans is not to go to war over the slightest offense. However, when our viewers will soon be out from under the onus of listening to my references to the Churchill biography, because I've only got like 300 pages to go in this 3-volume set. But one of the things that struck me in my readings today was how Churchill and Roosevelt were essentially Joe Stalin's stooges, because Stalin would do it. Stalin would do it. And that, it comes right down to it.
He played him like a fiddle.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so Churchill knew Stalin is going to take Poland. He's going to be, he's going to expand his sphere of influence. We need to use him for this Eastern Front, but he's going to do it because he does not have any moral compunction about doing it. And I think that's what the same with the Chinese. And we have a hard time relating to that, because then we say, well, if we then, react with firepower, are we as bad as he is?
Yeah, well, the thing is, Yalta was flawed, but it was also the best.
Well, let's save it for the show.
Oh, yeah,
I haven't gotten to. I'm just getting to Yalta. Don't spoil it.
Sorry.
I think Churchill described Yalta as the Riviera of hell.
Okay, so that's Stephen Green's topics for this week, taking us from one end of the world to the other, and from the micro to the macro. Bill Whittle, what you got for us?
I was looking at a number of these upcoming games, and some of them are spectacular, but a huge number of upcoming computer games, huge number of video games.
I thought you meant the Olympic Games. Okay,
deal with the zombie apocalypse. I mean, just scores of them. And we've covered a little bit before about how this whole idea of the zombie apocalypse is it gives liberals a chance to pretend they're conservatives, get a gun and a hatchet and go out there and so on. But here's the thing that actually interests me on this one that I'd like to talk about. In every single one of these futures, the world has become absolutely dog-eat-dog.
Dystopia.
The most brutal survive. And on those rare cases where you'll see a place of like organized so-called civilization, it's almost always a Christian enclave named New Salem or something like that, where they're going to carve the sin out of your flesh, and it's better out there with the wild dogs and than it is among these religious lunatics. And I'd never really thought deeply about it before, and certainly I'm not about to start now. But I think
it's only TV.
I think it's interesting to discuss whether or not we're not going to have a zombie apocalypse, much to my enormous disappointment. But it is possible to have a major apocalypse, some kind of a pandemic or something like that.
Sure.
And then the question is, would people behave the way that they behave in every single one of these games, or would civilization establish itself pretty quickly? I think that's an interesting question in the face of all of these zombie games.
Yeah, and it's in rare pockets, like when you on a smaller scale. Let's say back in, I forget what year this was. 1993. It was the year I got married. There was a flood in Missouri. The rivers were way up, and so during the same summer that Stephanie and I were getting married, they had this massive flood. And this little creek in Excelsior Springs went up bankful and over and wiped out a bunch of homes down in the valley. And, there's an opportunity for people to go hog wild and do whatever they pleased and, loot and pillage and all that kind of stuff. What happened? People came out of the woodwork who didn't even know their neighbors to help. And, immediately went down to the flood zone and began cleaning up and delivering food and delivering cleaning supplies. And the Baptist disaster relief people set up in the church up on the hill and began a very organized logistical operation. So, Bill, you've talked before about how the striking thing about going to impoverished third world nations that don't have that foundation in, what you might call the Protestant work ethic, that you could drop 3 of us in there and, within a week we'd have a working septic system up and running.
That's P.J. O'Rourke's direct quote, by the way.
Okay.
Well, I remember that one.
I'm, as Garrison Keillor, the now shamed Garrison Keillor once said, I'm about as well read as the average bus driver, and I used to be a bus driver. But anyway, this idea that suddenly society will collapse posits essentially a brain worm of some sort that infects everybody.
And yet conservatives believe more than liberals that mankind is not perfectible and is in fact after his own interests. But I would argue that your own interests are to get together with good people and try to get life back as fast as you can. In any event, that's what I want to talk about.
Right. It's the difference between a high trust and a low trust society, and I guess what it would take to in a very fast way, to reduce a high trust society to low trust.
You know, tangentially related, I read a story today, and it's tangentially because it was talking about video games, and somebody was talking about the crisis of, not enough women making video games and stuff like that, the diminished role of women. And I just thought, well, what's the logical? I mean, my understanding, I don't play, but my understanding is in video games, the logical conclusion of this is we want more female victims in video games. I mean, more of the characters need to be blown away. If you want parody, It's like,
but they're producing a lot of female heroes now, which I find a little disturbing.
Are we getting more female victims?
Well, there's always been victims of both sexes. The reason I find the heroes thing disturbing is because, in many cases, these are, 5 foot. I've mentioned this 100 times. 5'4" women who, through a combination of smooth moves, are able to bring down 220-pound guys, which is a dangerous assumption to put in the minds of a civilization. With that said, there's a significant percentage of women gamers, but if you look at the developers, this game I'm particularly interested in Star Citizen, I think there's maybe 1 out of 50 women.
Wow.
Now, that's not so much due to the fact that they've been excluded by culture so much as the quality of the men that go into computer game design, but that's a different story.
You're just looking to stir up trouble, aren't you?
I am.
Yep.
Okay, so this is my idea. And this is kind of another broad, sweeping question. The International Court of Justice at The Hague, which usually comes under a lot of derision from the right, had a panel of experts, including one person who was actually in the Auschwitz death camp, I think, take a look and interview witnesses who had escaped from North Korea and who had been in their penitentiary system, so to speak. And his conclusion, this guy with Auschwitz experience, is that it is worse in North Korea than it was in the death camps of Nazi Germany. Now, I believe that. That's not me saying that, and I don't know, what all the basis for that is, but they were, interviewing these witnesses at least as bad, possibly worse. Figures indicate some 130,000 North Koreans at any given time are in one of 4 massive camps, and those are the people who are lifers, and in sometimes generational lifers, like their grandfather is in there and their great-grandfather's in there if they've survived, because the Kim dynasty has been going on for 50, 60 years, whatever it's been. So they're in there. And then there's a whole other set for a minor infraction of, mildly disagreeing with some political point. You could go to a re-education camp, which has a fixed term, and then you get out and you're reintroduced to society. My question in all of this is, the West was slow to respond to the Nazi death camps. Arguments could be made that they didn't know much about it. Certainly in the Winston Churchill biography, it was pretty late in the war before Churchill realized the extent of what was going on there. However, when we know that there may be 130,000 souls in a situation that could approach or be worse than Auschwitz or Treblinka, what is our moral obligation?
It's a great question.
That is a great question. Wow.
It's hard to read a story like that and have any kind of even a passing knowledge of history and not feel a burden of some kind, even though right now I don't quite know what to do with it.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Before we film this segment, I'm going to fill this mug or one just like it with gin and maybe an ice cube.
Is that going to...
Gin is horrid.
That would bring some wisdom. There was...
Right.
Otherwise,
by the way,
think I can face it.
To end on a slightly lighter note, during the negotiations that Churchill had with... Greece was going into a civil war during about 1944 for after D-Day, but Churchill flew to Greece and pulled together some of the leading lights, including the scummy communists who were causing the Civil War, and brought them all together. Well, there was an Orthodox bishop whose name I can't pronounce or begin to remember, who came with a gift when he was meeting with the British and the other people part of this. He gave them a bottle of ouzo. Well, apparently the people who he gave it to thought it was a bottle of water and drank liberally of it. And in fact, Jacques Colville, who was Churchill's secretary, mixed it put a little with whiskey in it, thinking it was like whiskey and water. He said that was the closest to death he ever felt that he had come.
The thing is, you open a bottle of ouzo and you know that is not water.
Well,
that you might make that mistake while the cap is still on. Very quickly after that, you learn better.
I'm
an absinthe guy myself.
An absinthe guy.
The Green Fairy.
That's not likely to happen to me because I hate the taste of licorice. I genuinely despise it.
Bring me a mug of creme de menthe.
Oh, friends of mine are absinthe collectors, and I have to tell you, it's a very interesting drunk.
I'm a little absinthe-minded, but other than that.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that seems as good a place as any to end this. We thank you for watching. We thank you for supporting. We thank you for sharing those episodes, which may be shared. And anybody who is still in the room who's not a member, you can become a member at BillWhittle.com by going to the website known as it's http://www. Whatever.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks for making it easy,
Bill. Just Google.
And we're actually
Bill
doing
Whittle.
gift memberships to this for other people.
Tell me about that. How's that work?
Yeah.
You basically can give the gift of America's future to someone, and we will send a personally addressed card either to you or to them directly, depending on how much time you think you have. And it's a discounted rate of $100 for regular people, $70 for students, and $50 for veterans. And as far as our verification process is concerned, it's extremely sophisticated. We trust you, basically.
Now, Bill, I just want to clarify this. Can people who are watching this video right now do this?
They can, in fact, yes. It should be on our Facebook page, and we'll continue to post it on our Facebook page. We'll send if we haven't already, an email out to members and to people on our mailing list.
Great.
And if you're not already following Bill Whittle or even the Right Angle page on Facebook, both of those pages are almost good enough to justify being involved in Facebook. So we would encourage you to do that, and you can follow us all on Twitter as well. For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the entire Right Angle team at BillWhittle.com, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting Right Angle.